The villagers trembled even at the mention of the old bungalow. They said that every night after midnight, its door would mysteriously open, and anyone who entered would never return. Aryan, an investigative journalist, was determined to uncover the truth behind this eerie tale. Despite his friends' warnings, he decided to enter the bungalow. Truth lies beyond fear, Aryan said, determined to find it. At 11:50 p.m., Aryan arrived near the bungalow. The forest was silent, and the moonlight was hidden behind clouds. The door to the bungalow was old and weathered. At exactly midnight, as the clock struck, the door creaked open by itself. Aryan turned on his flashlight and stepped inside. His heart raced, but his curiosity outweighed his fear. Inside, the atmosphere was like an old cemetery. The walls were dark, the floor covered in dust, and a musty smell filled the air. A long corridor stretched ahead, with only an old lamp swaying gently. With every step Aryan took, he heard faint noises beneath the floor, as if someone was walking beneath him. Suddenly, he noticed blood-stained finger marks on the wall. Aryan entered an old room with a chair and a rocking cradle. Near the chair, a diary stained with blood lay on the ground. As Aryan bent down to pick it up, he heard a soft whisper from behind, "Leave me alone." Aryan quickly looked back, but no one was there. However, the coldness in the air made him shiver. Aryan moved into another room where old portraits hung on the walls. One portrait, of a woman in a white sari, caught his attention. Her eyes seemed to follow him. As Aryan passed by, he could swear the eyes moved. He pointed his flashlight directly at the painting, and to his shock, the eyes blinked. The light from Aryan's flashlight grew dimmer, and the room darkened. He spotted an old wardrobe in the corner. There must be something inside, he thought. He grabbed the handle of the wardrobe and pulled it open with force. Inside, a decaying body lay, slowly twitching. Aryan couldn't make a sound as he stared in disbelief. Suddenly, the spirit of a woman emerged from the wardrobe and said, "Anyone who enters here becomes part of this place." Desperate to save himself, Aryan tried to flee, but the door slammed shut, locking itself. The ghost was closing in. He struggled to open the door, but an invisible force pulled him back. Aryan screamed, "Let me out!" But his voice was drowned by the stillness of the forest. By morning, Aryan was nowhere to be found. All that remained near the bungalow was his flashlight and a diary, which contained the words, "Do not come here. This place is mine now." The villagers whispered that after that night, Aryan's ghost had become part of the bungalow. Every night at midnight, his face could be seen near the door. Remember, if you ever pass by that bungalow, do not go inside. That night could be the last of your life. It was 2 a.m. Adil was driving his car along an isolated highway. The weather was chilly, and an eerie silence filled the air. His phone signal had vanished, and there was no one in sight. As he drove, he spotted a woman walking alone on the highway. Surprised, Adil stopped the car. She was dressed in white, her face filled with sorrow. "Do you need a ride?" Adil asked. She nodded silently, climbed into the back seat and sat down. Adil started driving again, but the atmosphere inside the car felt strange. There was no sound from the back seat, as though the woman wasn't even there. Adil glanced at the rearview mirror and asked, "Where are you headed?" The woman replied softly, "Just take me ahead." Her voice carried an odd chill. For a moment, Adil's heart skipped a beat, but he shrugged it off, thinking, maybe she's just cold. As Adil drove, he looked in the rearview mirror again. The woman sat still, but her hand slowly reached toward him. Adil quickly turned to look behind, but her hand had returned to its normal position. He ignored it and increased the speed, trying to shake off the strange feeling. A thick fog suddenly rolled across the highway, and the car's headlights barely cut through the mist. In the fog, Adil began to feel as though something was following him, something shadowy just behind the car. Every time he looked back, the shadow seemed closer. He tried to convince himself, it's just my imagination, but his heart refused to believe it. Out of nowhere, the woman spoke. Do you know, this highway is cursed? Adil hesitated and asked, what do you mean? She replied, every night a new soul is claimed on this highway. Anyone who passes here at 2 a.m. never returns home. Adil's heart raced, but he tried to laugh it off. Why are you saying such strange things? The woman gave a cold smile and fell silent. Adil now felt something was terribly wrong. He looked back, only to find that the woman was no longer there. The back seat was completely empty. In panic, Adil stopped the car and got out to check. The rear door was still shut, but there was an old white dupatta lying on the seat. Bloodstains marred its fabric. Frantic, Adil quickly threw the dupatta out of the car and climbed back inside. But as soon as he started driving again, he saw, in the rearview mirror, the woman sitting on the front passenger seat. Her face was burned, her eyes weeping blood. She whispered, "You cannot leave me. You will stay with me now." Adil's heart raced as he pressed the accelerator, but the car came to a sudden stop. Trees around him started to burn, and an eerie scream filled the air. The woman reached out her hand toward Adil, and with a scream, he lost consciousness. By 6 a.m., locals found the car abandoned on the highway. On the front seat lay the white dupatta. Adil was never found. They say that anyone who drives on that highway at 2 a.m. becomes part of the curse. If you ever find yourself on that highway at 2 a.m., remember, never offer a lift. Who knows, you might be the next victim. Aliza and her friends were on a small trip to a village for an adventure. On the outskirts of the village, there was an old manor, abandoned for many years. The locals whispered that the manor was haunted by a ghostly figure waiting for someone to enter. Aliza, who loved supernatural mysteries, convinced her friends to check out the manor. As they approached the manor, a strange smell filled the air. The door creaked open, and they stepped into a room full of dust and cobwebs. Old paintings hung on the walls, and the floor was covered with dirt. "It's just an old house," Aliza said confidently. "Let's see what's inside." Inside the manor, they discovered a small room with a single candle burning brightly on a table. The light flickered in the otherwise dark space, and the walls were covered with strange symbols. Aliza's friends, Zara and Kabir, felt a chill run down their spines. "How is the candle still burning?" Zara asked, her voice trembling. Aliza smiled and replied, "Someone must have set it up before we got here." But Kabir wasn't so sure. "Look at the walls," he said, pointing to strange markings. "And the door behind us is locked." While exploring another room, they suddenly heard footsteps coming from the floor below. At first it was slow, then louder. "Where is that coming from?" Kabir asked, his eyes wide with fear. Aliza decided to go downstairs to check. As they reached the stairs, a shadow moved across the hallway. It was tall and seemed to glide rather than walk. "What is that?" Aliza whispered. The shadow disappeared behind a door, but they followed. In a room downstairs, they found an old mirror. blood was smeared on its surface, spelling out the words, "Leave now." Zara screamed in horror, while Kabir backed away. But Aliza stared at the mirror. "It's just a prank," Aliza said, though her face was pale. "Someone must have done this to scare us." She picked up a nearby diary, but before she could open it, a gust of wind blew out the candle, and the room went completely dark. The diary was from a woman who had once owned the manor. It revealed that a spirit had been trapped in the house for years, waiting for someone to help it escape. The last page of the diary read, "If you are reading this, leave immediately. The spirit will never be free unless you help, but if you make a mistake, you'll be trapped here forever." Zara was now frightened. "What does this mean? How do we free the spirit?" she asked, her voice shaking. But Kabir was already looking for a way to leave. "I think we should go now," he insisted. As they turned to leave, they realized that the door they had entered through was locked. No matter how hard they tried, the door wouldn't budge. The clock in the corner of the room began ticking loudly, signaling midnight. Just then, Zara felt something cold touch her hand. "Who's there?" she asked, looking around. But there was no one. "This is insane," Kabir muttered. "I think we've made a mistake." They discovered another room, this one smaller and filled with strange artifacts. A large altar stood in the center, with candles placed around it, and a picture of the same woman from the diary. Kabir was getting more anxious. "That looks like the ghost," he whispered. As Aliza approached the altar, the picture began to shake. Then, a loud voice echoed, "Why have you come here? You should have left while you had the chance." The voice belonged to the spirit trapped in the manor. Aliza bravely spoke, "We want to help." "What do you need?" The ghost screamed, "I need freedom, but if you fail, you'll never leave." Aliza started reading from the diary, performing a ritual she found inside. Candles lit up, and an eerie wind blew through the room. The ghost's anger grew stronger, and items began flying across the room. Zara and Kabir backed into a corner, terrified. In the final part of the ritual, Aliza had to burn the picture. But just as she set it on fire, the ground shook violently, and a bookshelf toppled over. From behind the shelves, a skeleton appeared. The ghost cried out, "You've trapped me again. You were supposed to free me." Everything fell silent. The room was dark, and then everything went still. The next morning, Aliza and her friends stood outside the manor, shaken but relieved. Kabir whispered, "Did we free the ghost?" But Aliza stayed silent. When she looked at her bag, she found the diary again, now with one final line written on the last page. "The manor is now yours." After that night, Aliza and her friends vanished. They were never seen again. The manor, now even more eerie, still stands in the village. Locals say that at midnight, the door opens, and shadows of Aliza and her friends can be seen wandering inside. No one dares to go near it anymore.